Hello, and welcome to the first night in a new film club series. This year the mix will be as eclectic as before, though instead of regular double bills, there'll be some seasons running in parallel, such as New Chinese Cinema and the Hollywood Blacklist, as well as retrospectives of Rossellini and Preston Sturgis. But tonight we open with something very special. Eureka may be the most affirmative word in any language. It was Archimedes' cry of triumph when he leapt from the bathwater after discovering specific gravity. It was Edgar Allan Poe's title for his last great work, A Meditation on the Cosmos. And it's the name of millionaire Jack McCann's Caribbean mansion in Nicholas Roeg's film Eureka, an almighty fable of one man's rise and fall, and probably the most ambitious movie by a British director this decade. Eureka! I've found it. Luckily there's no equivalent word for I've lost it. Otherwise it would surely have been yelled by Roeg soon after completing this $11 million film about a retired gold prospector living and dying on his lost dreams. The costliest film yet by the director of Don't Look Now and The Man Who Fell to Earth, Eureka was barely out of the can back in 1982 when Hollywood tried to put it firmly back in. MGM took one look at this Roeg product and deemed it so uncommercial that American release plans were cancelled. In Britain, it was aborted as a video release, and there was a time even the National Film Theatre couldn't get a copy for a special screening. I know, because I tried. I picked Eureka for a Critics' Choice season and spent weeks telephoning round between MGM, producer Jeremy Thomas, and a harassed Nicholas Roeg to find a print. Whatever did MGM find so frightening? It's true, Eureka is not the Sound of Music. It's a towering cinematic invention based on true-life foundations. The model for Jack McCann, played by Gene Hackman, was millionaire ex-gold prospector Sir Harry Oakes, who was brutally murdered in Nassau in 1943. Who did it? No one knows to this day, nor why, though his French playboy son-in-law Alfred de Marigny was tried and acquitted. Roeg and screenwriter Paul Mayersberg have taken small hints from this cause célèbre and turned them into a giant fiction. A fiction that echoes, like the icy mountains of the film's prologue set in the Yukon, with whistling mysteries and questions. McCann may also die a cruel death, but did he die spiritually years before, when his great adventure in the goldfields was fulfilled and ended? Burnt out by that early ecstasy, he now lives on in the spirit of his daughter, Tracy, played by Teresa Russell. Her near telepathic closeness is suggested in Roegian scenes of rhyming cross-cut action and Freudian imagery, notably a gold chain that's like a father-daughter umbilical cord. The film is about a man's soul that's up for grabs. The murder, hints Roeg, is part suicide, McCann's willed self-destruction, and it's part cannibalism as he's closed in on by two groups of predators. One group is materialistic, Miami-based gangsters, and the other is spiritual, the parasitic son-in-law, Claude. Preeningly played by Rutger Hauer, Claude leeches McCann's soul through McCann's own daughter. Perhaps the film's most astounding turn comes in a long, bizarre trial scene in which Tracy and Claude peel away at each other's souls, as if the eerily lit courtroom were a theatre presided over by Judge Strindberg. But then expecting a straight story from Nicholas Roeg is like expecting a straight roller coaster. Eureka swerves and soars through time and space, and it rumbles thunderously with allusion and quotation, not least from Citizen Kane in its portrait of a modern Midas, complete with Xanadu-like mansion, doom-laden marriage, and a hand closing over a talismanic keepsake. Eureka is that rare thing, a true modern tragedy, a tale that begins with passion and ends in an almost biblical passion. And it boasts a hero played with powerhouse grandeur and unforced pathos by Gene Hackman. That's what I feel about the film. Now we're going to hear three of the film's creators talk about it: producer Jeremy Thomas, writer Paul Mayersberg, and even its normally camera-shy director, Nicholas Roeg.
Well, I'd previously made a film with Nick, Bad Timing, which was the first time we'd worked together. We enjoyed the experience very much. And Nick had loved this subject and had got this book, King's X, or Who Killed Sir Harry Oakes. It had two different titles written by Marshall Howard. Paul Mayersberg had worked with Nick before on Man Who Fell to Earth, and he was the writer of the movie.
Nico expected me not to know the story. Now, on the whole, you wouldn't know the story, but it so happened that someone years ago had come to me with the same book. So I'd read it, and it seemed to me that it was a magnificent idea for a film about family relationships, if you like, that were connected with the social circumstances of the time.
All the characters, I had a sense that they were all, it's a terrible word, symbols, but as in some great play, let's say, the daughter, the father, the wife, the husband, the young husband, rather extraordinary, more extraordinary, larger than life. And McCann was a man who was single-mindedly wanted to be more than his own person, but to thank no one for.
We made an explicit reference to Wells's film with the big house, which he called Eureka, which was a corollary, if you like, to Xanadu in Cain. But there was no connection in our minds between Jack McCann, our semi-invented character, and Citizen Kane and William Randolph Hearst. The connection really was to Orson Welles, because our story was one which tells of a man who, having got what he wanted, then finds that there's no further to go, and his life slips and slides to a kind of chaotic despair. And that was not the story of Hearst, obviously, or of Kane. It was the story of Welles, who struck gold, if you like, with Citizen Kane, and then paid for the next 50 years of his life with despair. So the story that interested us, really, was how it would be, how did it come about, that when you get what you want, it's not that you don't want it, it's what it does to you, and that then your life is really over. So in a sense, Jack McCann died twice. Once at the moment that he found the gold and achieved his aim, and twice, the second time, when he was murdered.
I've wanted to have it in the sense that it takes a lot to kill that, a lot of killing to snuff out that life force. But it always seems that bullfights, the bull seems to live on against these little people that are struggling to kill this magnificent beast, and still roars against being destroyed by people he could destroy and would not die. Life is very precious and it's very powerful. From a baby, there was a line in it originally, and there was another scene when Jack and Tracy are driving in the car, and he says to her, "I remember your birth. I remember you all covered in blood like a terrible murder." And I thought it was wonderful, but the sort of prescient thought. But her birth was a powerful, a marvelous thing. The relationship with the father and daughter was particularly interesting to me because I wanted it to be more than merely a loving relationship as quite a natural thing. That yes, I love my daddy and I love my daughter, and that she's the apple of my eye. I wanted her to be the very clone of McCann, that truly part of him. And it struck me that if we could find a way that they knew exactly what each other, how they were thinking or how their mind worked. It's the lover's oldest question, isn't it? Do you love me, darling? What are you thinking? And you can never tell anybody. So how to get inside that? And we worked as the dinner party scene was essentially to exclude everybody else but Jack and the daughter.
And our view was that for her, who were a woman who had money, as it were, who had position and so forth, what she wanted, the gold of her life, if you like, was a man, not property or the magic of gold itself or whatever. And he couldn't stand this. He couldn't stand this man. So, in a way, it becomes a story of sexual jealousy.
I thought it was wonderful of Rutger that big enough to accept the fact that Claude ends being a weak person. In the trial, he's told who he is, comes to face with himself. When you look at me, what do you see? She said, I see a man that can't pass a mirror without looking at it. I think it was Verlaine that said, goodbye, said the dying man as he looked in the mirror. I shan't be seeing you anymore.
So what was actually a trial about who killed Jack McCann turned into a trial of the people themselves, that their lives were equally on trial because of this horrendous event. And then it turns out that everybody connected with the trial has something to hide. So really, it was the story of the things that were hidden.
Maybe I'm a jinx.
Yes, maybe. What does it mean? Jinx.
It's a regular cry from a producer or filmmakers when a film is not popular, but we didn't really get a proper a shot anywhere. It started off with MGM, who started developing the film. And then MGM was bought by United Artists, and then it was merged with United Artists, and then Eureka finally, whilst we were midway through production, became United Artists Picture. And we had many studio bosses and heads of production. It was sort of opened with shame, because I think there was a lack of understanding of the film, an embarrassment of the film, maybe. The strength of the film. The film's very, very strong, and has a lot of subtext to the film, and maybe that offended some people. But on the surface, I couldn't understand it because the film is an incredible adventure story, very exciting, with an incredible cast.
My own feeling is that the film was disliked by the company who made it, probably because it said something that was not acceptable, or that they did not believe it was an acceptable commentary on, let's say, American life. And that is that since the American dream is one in which endeavor finally pays off, here was a story about the way in which endeavor seemed to be a curse, and that victory turned into disaster.
Curiously, over the past years, we've come to think that it was the beginning of a different era, and that looking back historically, it was the beginning of a different era socially, certainly in England and in America, the coming of a very conservative time. And it was the year it came out in England that was the election year, the first election year of Margaret Thatcher, which I think was wonderful for England in some ways and terrible in others, and Ronald Reagan in America entering a hugely conservative, by conservative I mean materialistic time. And I think the idea, some even maybe subconsciously, that a man who had made such a success wasn't happy. I'm sure, it sounds mad, but I'm sure subconsciously, politically, it was not at the right time.
It was very disappointing, and I think the film, even released today, would still have a very good audience. So really, the showing of the movie on television is quite exciting, because then you've got probably a big audience, and we can sort of gauge a reaction to the film better.
There have been so many opinions, and so many people have wanted, from the studio to critic everyone. I think it's marvellous that the BBC have said, well, we won't have an opinion about it, we will show it as it was, so, let the poor little cripple walk if it can. If it can't, then let it not. And that's the only way to behave with things that give people a chance in life. Let them be their own person, and let the film be have its own say.
So there you have it. Before the film begins, though, I must give you fair warning. Eureka contains some strong language and scenes of intense violence. It's nothing if not uncompromising, even by Nicholas Roeg's standards.